Hello everyone and welcome to the video solution of the class activity Weather in Bujumbura. This activity gives students practice with making API calls and handling responses. So what we're going to be using is the Open Weather Map API to figure out what the current weather is in Bujumbura. The first thing we want to do is save all of our configure information, i.e. the API key, the base URL, etc. before moving on. So let's go ahead and open up Jupyter Notebook. So the first thing I'm going to do is import my dependencies. Okay, so we have our requests library to allow us to make our API calls. And I also have a Python file stored with my Jupyter Notebook file called config. And in it, there's a variable called API key. By doing this, we don't have to display our API key at all. Next up, I'm going to save the configuration information. Let's take a quick look at the instructions before I explain more about these. We want to build a query URL and we want to request the temperature in Celsius. And the way we do that is by specifying metric. So Open Weather Map has 3 different temperature units. Standard, which gives us Kelvin, metric, which gives us Celsius, and imperial, which gives us Fahrenheit. Now, the default is Kelvin, so we want to have our temperature in Celsius. So what we'll do is we'll add a parameter, and units equals metric at the end of our query URL, which is what I'm going to be building next. As you can see, we have our query URL. We're using format here, so we don't have to do any concatenation. We can just type out our entire URL as we want. We have the base URL, which is the openweathermap.org. And then we have our API key, which we imported earlier. And then we have our first query parameter, which is the city, which is stored as Bujumbura. And last but not least, we have the units. And I've printed out the URL. And if we copy and paste this, we'll get the data on Bujumbura. We want to access the main temperature right here, and as you can see, it is in Celsius. Next up, I'm going to store the weather data. So we're doing a GET request on the URL we built earlier, and then we're storing the JSON response into weather JSON. And I'm just printing it out, and we have the same information that we got from when I copy and pasted the URL into the browser. Next up, I want to store the temperature from the JSON response. Here we're accessing the temperature by accessing the keys. So the first key we want to access is the main key, since we know we want to access the temperature, which is right here. And to get that, we have to go into the main key first. And then we access the temperature key, and stored into that is 21.31. Next up, we're going to report the temperature instead of just printing it out. Using the same formatting structure as before, saying the temperature in Bujumbura is 21.31 Celsius. As a bonus, we want to augment the code to report the temperature in both Fahrenheit and Celsius. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a list of units. So since we want Fahrenheit and Celsius, Fahrenheit is represented by imperial and Celsius is represented by metric. Next up, I'm going to set up a list to hold the 2 different temperatures. And now I'm going to loop through this list right here, the units list, and edit the query URL for each of them. So for the first part, we're looping through units, so for unit in units. So the first one's going to be metric. We're building the URL based on the current element in units. So we're using the same formatting as before. We have our base URL and our API key and our city. The only difference is instead of doing units here, we'll just do the 1 unit because we want the current one. Next up, I'm going to just get the weather data. Here we're doing another GET request on the query URL we've built immediately before based on the current element in units, and we're storing the JSON response into weather JSON. Next up, I'm going to get the temperature from this weather JSON and append it to our empty temperatures list. And we're accessing the JSON the exact same way. It's going to be the same response, and we're storing it into temperature, and we're appending. Now this is going to run through twice. One time going to be metric, and the other time going to be imperial. Okay, last but not least, we want to report the temperatures by accessing each element in the list. So the temperature in Bujumbura is either 21.31 Celsius or 70.35 Fahrenheit. And that is the video solution to Bujumbura.